Hi everyone, Joy here again. I know it's been a while, but I've been super busy, what with my new job and stuff. But anyway, I'm, back. So, let's take a look at some stuff, shall we? Now, today's video is going to be about education. So, growing up and living in England, I had what you might call a fairly typical upbringing in terms of sex education and religious education. So my primary school was Church of England and my secondary school was secular. My primary school had religious themed assemblies every day in which we would have to pray and sing hymns, and there would be like speakers from the local churches. And it was quite literally prayer 3 times a day, morning, lunch and afternoon. And so thinking back about all of these things that I used to do, that the school would instruct us to do, basically I think I did them more out of habit and programming than actual belief. Because as a child, obviously, one's critical thinking is not fully developed, which is sort of the reason why religions are so insidious when they go after instructing children in their ways. But I do recall, however, that I did actually believe in my own unique special way. I remember this one time I did a drawing of God. We had to do a drawing of God. Now, I don't know if that's particularly sacrilegious in and of itself, having, to ask children to do that, but whatever. That's what we did. And I remember that God was the creator of, basically the creator of all mankind, all men and all women, and something along those lines, right? So I had it in my head that God was in fact half man and half woman. So I did this picture of like half male and half female. And I don't know what that really says about the way that they instructed me. I mean, I think it probably says more about me than it does about God, But I was going off this assumption that we are all made in God's image. So God's image has to be both male and female, because those are the only 2 options that I was aware of at the time. So, now of course looking back on this, it pisses me off, okay? Because the fact is that they are poisoning the critical thinking of children, This is indoctrination at a very early age, before you can actually make up your mind and really think about what it is that you believe. So we did this, I think it was like a couple of months on Pakistan, and of course Pakistan is a predominantly Islamic country. And we had this instruction on the basis of like, here's what they believe, here's what they do. They pray 5 times a day, which, oh my god, doesn't sound so strange considering we were being forced to pray at least 3 times a day. Their religious building is called a mosque, and their god is called Allah, and their holy book is called the Quran. And it's basically like transposing Christianity onto Islam. They're not that different. They're not that different. And, here's what they do differently, here's what they do the same. Here's what they wear, but here's what they think. That's, what I remember from that. However, when it came to atheists, and I remember this so clearly, actually verbatim, When I was in year 6, so I must have been about 10 years old at the time, my teacher said to us, atheists believe we evolved from slime. Now, I know this is, now, I know this is wrong for at least 2 reasons. One of them is that atheism doesn't actually make any presuppositions about evolution. The only thing that atheism attempts to answer is the question of, do you believe in God? And that answer being no. The other reason, of course, is that no one believes that we evolved from slime. Obviously the point of saying that was to undermine atheists. And the message that I got, somewhat subconsciously, I guess, was that other theists, not so bad. Atheists, on the other hand, So, I've pulled up some statistics about religion in the 2011 census. People who identified as Christian are 33 million, which is roughly 59% of the population. No religion is 14 million, which is roughly 25% of the population, a quarter of the population of the UK, versus just over a half of the population as Christians. And then breaking it down into the other religions, we have Muslim, 2 million, which is 4.8% of the population. And then Hindu, Sikh, Jewish, Buddhist, other, and not stated are all fairly sort of small. They make up the other sort of small percentages. Now, what prompted me to want to make this video in the first place was that I read this article from The Guardian that says the Church of England is facing a catastrophic fall in the proportion of young adults who describe themselves as Anglican, as data shows an acceleration towards a secular society. For the first time, more than half the population say they have no religion, and the generation gap on religious affiliation is widening, according to the British Social Attitudes Survey. Now, bear in mind, this British Social Attitudes Survey is not the census. It's not the 2011 census. This was carried out in 2017. So this is a more up-to-date survey, but it is less comprehensive when you look at the whole country. So I'll link the article below, but I find it interesting that it says that more than half the population say they have no religion according to this survey, which means that there are trends towards people essentially losing their religion, but there is also a sense that people might on a census say that they are Christian because they have been christened, but then don't follow through with any of the other religious practices and are only stating that because it's a more official sort of government-sanctioned survey. So the point there is still the majority of primary schools are Church of England, despite the fact, or, religious in some way, despite the fact that most of the population are secular, and this does not represent what people's actually beliefs are as to how children are taught. And this is really quite, disturbing. So, what does all this have to do with sex education anyway? Well, not much. See, children at primary school age are not taught about sex education as such, but we were taught around about the age of 9 or 10 about puberty, and we were given separate classes, the males and the females, and yeah, and we were shown the video about like what's going to happen, like, you know, your voice is going to change and you're going to get body hair and you're going to get this and you're going to get that, and things are going to happen downstairs that we won't even talk about. So, fast forward to secondary school and sex education, and there was, you know, biology lessons sort of gave us the basics, like the peen in vagine story, but also that we got shown several different types of contraception as well. But zero focus on relationships, and this was during the era of Section 28. So teachers were basically forbidden from even mentioning homosexuality. And Section 28, got it right here, Section 28 of the 1988 Local Government Act stated, a local authority shall not, A, intentionally promote homosexuality or publish material with the intention of promoting homosexuality, B, promote the teaching in any maintained school of the acceptability of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship. Nothing above shall be taken to prohibit the doing of anything for the purpose of treating or preventing the spread of disease. Now you can break that down quite a lot, but what it's basically saying is don't talk about being gay in schools, because icky and diseased. And Section 28 was enforced from 1988 until the repeal in Scotland in 2000 and in the rest of the United Kingdom in 2003. Now, I went to school from 89 until 2001. So there was no point when I was at school where Section 28 was not being enforced. So the point there is that there are still children and teens that are getting education to this day from teachers with no real experience with these basics about how to teach that, you know, homosexuality is acceptable. And let's not even get started about the whole rest of the discussion about bisexual people and trans people and so on. But that is changing, but people still need more education on the matter. So what's my point here? Well, given the combination of religious influences and homophobic legislation, my education suffered from the lack of information that I would later need in life regarding sex, relationships, and critical thinking skills. Worse still, the homophobia and transphobia fueled by the religion in primary school led some of the teachers to actively suppress my personal development. And strangely enough, that actually I noticed it got worse when I was in the secondary school, because it was ruled by these old-fashioned authoritarians who hadn't really had a chance to learn about how homosexuality is acceptable, it's perfectly fine, it's not going to kill you, and you know, just because AIDS was a thing, and it still is a thing, doesn't mean it's necessarily a gay thing, you know. But that's what the attitude in the 80s was. Now some, not all, but some of the teachers actually hated my lack of conformity, and that kind of, I think, pushed me even further into non-conformity, you know, like just pushed me into the rebelling of the authority. But some teachers did show their support in the small ways that they could. I remember one of them said, you know, to me on the last day of school, oh, you'll be fine, just be you, kind of thing. I forget the exact words, but that was the message she said to me. And by that time I was 16 and I was able to pick up on the social cues of, yes, I know what you're talking about. But she was not able to express it, you know, out loud verbally, clearly what she was saying, which, you know, because of the legislation, was obviously quite damaging to a lot of people. I felt the brunt of that when people, you know, were bullying me because of being different and stuff like that, and there was no way of preventing that, you know, because those teachers would have lost their jobs, whether they supported me or didn't, you know. But anyway, that's a little bit about my education as a, yes, technically I'm a millennial, growing up in the UK, going to school in the 90s. Thanks for watching as always, and, you know, I will see you next time. Bye.